Hey everybody, it's Neal from Growlies, and I'm here with Matt Bonanno from Iron Will Raw. Thanks for joining me, Matt.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Neal.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with a manufacturer, somebody who's doing it right at Iron Will. You have some really good practices I want to cover today, and I guess the first start thing is tell me about your pets and why you got into fresh foods.
Yeah, so about 6 years ago, I had a box. Well, actually, it was probably closer to 10 or 12 years ago now. I had a boxer, and I, wanted to feed him the best possible diet, and I just wasn't happy with the current food that I was feeding. So I started researching, what a more appropriate diet would be for him. And being an active person and having a very active dog, we stumbled upon a fresh food diet. So that really got me thinking and got me into feeding a fresh food diet. And then as time went on, I started participating in the sport of IPO, which is a dog sport that does protection, obedience, and tracking. With working with those types of dogs, obviously they're at a higher caliber. They need a little bit of a better diet, or so I felt. And when I got one of my shepherds, I started feeding him raw as well. So as time went on, I started kind of formulating a little bit of my own diets for my pets. And that's where I really saw, obviously, the largest difference in their well-being. So that got me into researching further. And of course, a friend of mine had actually reached out and said, hey, we've got a small, clientele. I'm moving actually out west, and I'd like to have somebody continue on. So knowing that I was already doing this type of stuff, it was a perfect fit. So at that point, I quit my day job and came back to Niagara Falls. I was living out in Toronto at the time. And kind of went, 2 feet in. So from there, Iron Will started, and we started, distributing to local pet stores and, and end users throughout the area. So
You're braver than I. You dove both feet first right in.
Oh yeah, I quit my job. I was a carpenter at the time, working through one of the local carpenter unions, and so had a great gig. Really enjoyed working with my hands and doing that type of stuff, but knew that it probably wasn't something that I wanted to do forever. So
Yeah. Well, carpentry, it can be tough on the body. It's a
yeah,
good skill. It's a good skill to have, though.
yes, it's helped
Yeah.
me plenty over the last 6 years. So
No doubt, no doubt. Being able to build your own stuff, that's kind of cool.
yeah, well, as we started, of course, there's a lot of different things that as a raw food manufacturer that you have to have, and one of those being, as I'm sure you're aware, walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers. So
We know about freezers, let me tell you.
yeah, I remember seeing that. So it was great for me. I was able to actually build the boxes and do all of that myself, and just have somebody come in and install all the refrigeration and stuff. So it definitely paid off for me for sure.
That's awesome. And so, since you've taken the company, 6 years is a fairly short period of time to grow the company in the way that you have. How have you managed some of those growth strategies or the pains of growing? Because it can be quite challenging with having suppliers keep up and having, adding extra shifts and all that stuff. How's that going?
Yeah, so it was definitely tricky to start off. Learning, the ins and outs of the business, learning the ins and outs of manufacturing, and the different things that we need was certainly challenging. And being first time in business, just getting used to having staff and all that stuff was certainly a challenge. So you get to learn the accounting side, you get to learn the manufacturing side, you get to learn all the different hats that you have to play as a new owner. And over the years, the growth has been tremendous. So, just, really working with our team and making sure that we're hiring people and bringing people onto the team that, are invested and see the potential in the position that they're coming into. And we really do have an amazing team, and we've been able to really help grow that. And, you know, in even bringing in people that, you know, as we've grown and we're able to afford, bring people in that have experience in the different aspects of, you know, even human food manufacturing. You know, a lot of what we
you
do.
didn't necessarily know, right?
Yeah, and a lot of what we do is very similar, and you know, and being a HACCP certified company, there's definitely people out there that know the ins and outs of food safety and manufacturing very well.
So you touch on a topic there I want to talk about, but before we talk about HACCP and some of the certifications that manufacturers can go through, I want to talk about you as a company. One of the things I really like is you have a living wage program. I read that on your website, where you're ensuring that the people who work for you can be active members of their community. I love that.
Yeah, and that's something that we implemented. I want to say it was just over a year ago now. You know, in the dynamic these days, you know, there's a lot of you know, a lot of great companies out there. There's a lot of different job opportunities, and you know, things are a little bit more difficult when it comes to hiring these days. So, you know, we want to make sure, again, you know, that we are building a great team and having people that are invested in the company and what we're doing. So, you know, to uphold our quality standards and some of the different certifications that we want to uphold, you know, we feel that obviously part of that's going to be having people who are proud and paid well and are able to contribute to the community as well, and
Yeah.
have a family and all of that stuff, right? So
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love it. I love it. More manufacturers and retailers need to do that kind of thing.
yeah, well, the Ontario Living Wage Network seems to be growing quite significantly since we started. I think we were somewhere around like the 7th or 8th, and I want to say they're up past 20 plus other businesses in the area that have joined on. So you know, more people are seeing it, and I believe I read an article maybe a couple weeks ago that even St. Catharines is looking at you know, implementing that as a citywide initiative. So yeah, more people are getting onto it, and I think it's great. For sure.
It's the kind of leadership we need to see as people in business, you know.
Yeah.
And so tell me about HACCP. So that was one of is that the first certification you went for as a manufacturing company?
Yeah, so that was, I always kind of knew I'm a very particular person. So even from the days where I started in my basement, I knew that having some type of food safety certification and really focusing on that was going to be imperative, at least for our company or for my company. And, you know, we really started looking at that very early on. And, you know, it definitely took some time to develop, but, you know, from here, you know, we look to get into other, you know, certifications, whether it be SQF, you know, and that's ultimately what we're aiming for.
So we're heading into the land of magic acronyms. So what's HACCP mean to somebody who doesn't know?
HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point.
Right. And now you as a company, you come up with what that means essentially, don't you? It has some guidelines, and then you guys decide what that means within your company. Is that correct?
Yeah, so ultimately we're looking at our process, and we're basically establishing what those critical control points are in our process. And then basically, you know, we have to go through and we have to establish, you know, the critical control limits to ensure that, you know, we have something that, you know, we can ensure that the system is working. So then we're going to put all our procedures in place, whether it be, you know, checking temperatures or checking the quality of the goods when they come in. You know, all of that stuff gets put in place, and then from there we have to verify through our systems that all that stuff is actually working. So,
right. Right. And so for the layman, essentially it's a standard way of doing the manufacturing that includes temperature control, bacterial testing, and no mixing of proteins unless it's involved in the recipe.
Yeah, looking at stuff like cross-contamination exactly is a big part of, and looking at the way that the facility is laid out. So, that again, you're not having stuff that's potential for cross-contamination. So you're not moving, dry goods up the hallway at the same time as you're moving your raw material, or you're not passing raw material with finished goods, stuff like that.
Yeah, they don't touch each other.
Yes, exactly. They're not stored in the same areas. They're, stored at, a temperature controlled area in the facility, stuff like that.
And then there's GMP, which is just good manufacturing processes. And then what was the other one you mentioned?
GMPs. So yeah, would have a full set of GMPs. And then there's SQF, which is Safe Quality Food Institute, which is like a globally certified food safety system.
And you're still working towards that one, or have you gotten that one?
Yeah, we're close.
Yeah, it's a challenge one. That one, right?
Yes, it's definitely a couple steps above. There's a lot of different aspects to SQF that go above and beyond just having a HACCP plan. So we're very, very, very close. So
that's awesome.
Looking forward to that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations! I think that's phenomenal. It's those kinds of certifications. Since nobody in Canada is essentially watching pet food, it's nice to see those third parties verifying that you're trying to do things correctly.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, especially for the consumer. Of course, everybody has budgets, and we're not here to try and break the bank, but ultimately in the end, somebody has to be accountable for, the product that they're purchasing off the shelf. And really in any other industry, it really comes down to the manufacturer
right.
to have, systems in place that, ensures that the consumer is getting the product that's, being marketed to those consumers.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. No, I think that we need to see more of that in this industry, not less.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be very important in the next, few years to see people and hopefully, retailers will start demanding this of the industry because, with things being unregulated and nobody there to really watch what's going on, they're at risk as well of potential liability, right? So,
mm-hmm. And how hard is it for you to find HACCP compliant shippers? So just to let the people listening know, not only are you HACCP certified, but you have to work with shippers who are compliant to the HACCP certification or maintain the same structure around their business. So for us, I'm on an island, and we have one company that's HACCP certified that delivers to us on an almost daily basis. And but they're HACCP compliant. They can't be HACCP certified. They're not a manufacturer. So how hard is it for you to find HACCP compliant shippers?
Anybody in the supply chain that is doing anything considerable with human food
mm-hmm.
Is going to have some type of food safety system in place. And a lot of the companies that we use, whether it be Herb Transport or Midland Transport, these guys all have different monitoring systems within their trucks,
mm-hmm.
so that we can ensure that if something does go wrong, and say a distributor or a store gets a bad shipment, that we're able to go back to that shipper and say, hey, consumer aid says that this got there and it was thawed, and there was issues with the product. We know that we've checked it at our dock when they picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got documentation that states, what the temperature is and that it left in okay condition. At that point, then they would have to look at their system and see where that broke down. And that's really, the basis of a food safety system is to actually be able to catch where those breakdowns are. Everybody's human, things happen, but it's being able to catch those things before it becomes an issue.
Right. And so it doesn't happen on a regular basis. It's a one-off accident instead of a...
Yeah. Typically it's not something that's happening all the time.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
Yes.
Because I'm usually waiting for those goods. So, I want them to get to me in good condition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Especially given all the investment in freezers we have to make.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you have quite the store there with all of
It's coming along. We're proud. We like it. And so tell me about the meats that you're bringing in. So and why you've chosen not to use any mechanically deboned meats.
So definitely, mechanically separated meats are, big in, pet food and treat manufacturing and stuff. And, there's certainly a place for them. I personally feel that I would rather have something that's not already processed going into our recipes. So if I can buy just maybe a leg trim or something like that, or a leg meat that would be going into something like a ground, say ground turkey or a ground chicken, that hasn't been ground already. It's just been maybe taken off the bone. For me, that's a better product, or I see that as a better product. So that's something that I would use. And to be honest, there's also potentially a little bit more of a ready available supply of stuff like that.
Mm.
So again, that's part of our job, is to figure out what different parts and pieces that we can buy and have consistent supply of, right?
Right.
So I just I've kind of looked at all the different parts and pieces and stuff that are out there that we could use, and I've said, this is what I feel comfortable putting into our food.
Yep.
And it's really not what I feel comfortable putting in our food. So.
Well, I mean, it shows in the quality. I got to say, my dogs love it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, but they like to eat every day.
Yes, mine don't usually complain either.
No, yeah. I don't have the finicky dogs. So
No.
you do a basic with no veg and a veg recipe, both. And I've been seeing a lot of our cat people picking up the basic. Do you encourage people to do exactly that, or do you make a cat blend specifically?
No, so currently we don't have a specific cat blend.
Okay.
Our basics really were, kind of a multi-purpose line. One being that we do have, finicky dogs. We do have dogs with potential sensitivities or dietary restrictions. So we want to make sure that any consumer that walks in is able to pick something that, potentially will work for their pet, or pick something that would work as a base for their pet, and then you as a retailer, or all the other retailers that we work with, are able to kind of guide that consumer, or they might know specific additives that they need to put into the diet to make that a complete meal for their pet. And it just allows for a lot of flexibility there. And we do find that because of the different nutritional analysis that we do have on the product, taurine is one that we've been testing for the last couple of years. So we make it very easy for retailers to look at the product and be able to work with those cat customers to say, hey, if you're feeding something like our turkey that has 193 milligrams per ounce of taurine, you're going to be within those daily requirements for your pet. And they can go ahead and feel comfortable without having to look for an added taurine supplement.
Yeah, just to clarify for people who might not know, taurine is an amino acid that carnivores require to maintain proper health as well as breeding. And Pottinger's cats, a study by a fellow named Pottinger, who did a study with cats, showed us that was a requirement. And that's when we learned that back in I want to say 40s, but it might have been the 50s. Going into the 60s even, because I think it was a study done over time. There's other amino acids that are required, like L-carnitine, which are only found in meat for both dogs and cats. And so how are you doing your formulation at this point? How are you coming up with recipes?
So currently we're actually working with some local veterinarians or food formulators. We've also reached out to some professional formulators within Canada here to work with us on our recipes. So any new recipes that we would be formulating would be done with some, obviously the nutritional requirements, in mind.
Mm-hmm.
We are actually really looking forward to releasing some new updates to our recipes and to obviously the nutritional content of those. So, just developing and, moving forward and using any new research that we can to ensure that we're putting out a quality product and, of course, a nutritionally complete product as well.
Yeah, like anything, as we learn, we change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's always new, new information coming out, new studies being done, and really that's, I feel like such a great thing about the world today is so many people are invested in the industry and in their pets' health that, we are seeing, stuff like raw food, which is now becoming a larger part of the pet food market. People are paying attention and they're doing those studies to see what it is that we need to be including in our pets' diets to make them healthier and make them live longer.
Yeah, I tell people at my store all the time, any fresh food's better than no fresh food. If you continue to feed a processed food diet, so be it. That's great. Include some fresh, because some fresh better than none.
Yeah, anything that you can get in the bowl, I think is helpful. So, yeah, I think that's, rather than having to convert people over to a full raw diet, I think it's great if we can get them even feeding a quarter of the diet or half of the diet.
Yeah. And what kinds of raw meaty bones do you offer up? Because you guys have a bone line.
Yeah, so we do have a bone line. So, we do a lot of the typical, beef marrow bones cut into a 1 inch, a 3 inch, and a kind of 5 to 6 inch bone. Beef neck bones, which are some of my favorite raw meaty bones. I just find they've got all those little nooks and crannies that dogs can really get their teeth in there and kind of clean up any of that plaque that might be in there.
Mm-hmm.
We also do stuff like, your meal replacement bones that whether it be a chicken neck or turkey neck, duck necks, stuff like that, just to help people, keep their pets occupied and give their mind something to do.
Absolutely. And one of the things people don't get is that if dogs who can't do chicken, because chicken often is raised for speed to market, and so it can be quite inflammatory, that duck is waterfowl and it's not raised in the same way, and that those duck necks are generally really safe and great options for dogs who can't do chicken.
Yeah, and they're actually a great size. So, for the majority of dogs, they're a really nice size. They're not too big, they're not too small. So, I find, they work for a lot of people.
Yeah. And so how much in your recipe with veg, how much of that product is veg?
So we do roughly about 5% vegetables, and ideally we like to use green veg, which we find is higher in some of those essential vitamins and minerals that we need. So, we have the blend of kale, spinach, parsley, and kelp. And we find that that's really worked well with our consumers and their pets.
Yeah, and the kelp adds extra minerals as well that come along with it because it's a sea vegetable.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, you've got your iodine in there to complete, the iodine requirements of pets as well.
Yeah, because one of the things I think people don't know about the iodine is you have to offer a healthy source of iodine, because if you don't offer one, the body still needs it, and it'll accept in any form of chemical iodine as if it's a healthy form. And there are unhealthy forms of iodine available in the environment.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's definitely many different types of supplements out there that people can supplement their diet with. But, if you can get it from a natural, clean source, then, ultimately, I feel like that's what people would prefer to do.
Yeah, we preferred the food-based ones over the synthetics as well.
Absolutely.
And so what kind of supplementation do you request people consider when they're using the Iron Will fresh food diets?
So supplements I find can be very specific to a pet's needs.
Mm-hmm.
But we always recommend something like an omega fatty acid and or some type of oil supplement, depending if the dog has any sensitivities to fish potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So, we really want to be able to get those omega fatty acids into the diet. And typically, because of the way, oils oxidize, typically we want to see that added to the diet at the time of feeding.
Yeah, I agree.
we don't typically add that to our recipes, partially for that reason.
What would oxidize as you were stirring?
What's that?
It would oxidize as you stir it in.
Yeah, and of course, we're mixing in our machines and
Exactly.
through everything. So, there's potential there for the degradation of those omega fatty acids. So, yeah, putting it on the diet at the time of feeding is the best. Vitamin E is another big one. It's actually really hard to get vitamin E out of meat. It's just not readily available. So, and as we are looking to refresh some of our recipes, we're learning more about some of these different vitamins and minerals that are required that we need to have supplementation for, or use other sources of whether it be fruits and vegetables or seeds to add to the diet to make it nutritionally complete.
Yeah, because you hear a lot in the raw feeding community about selenium and manganese and some of these rare earth metals.
Yeah, iron is even a big one.
Well, you think iron comes with blood?
Yes, but it can definitely be one that you want to be careful of, depending on the type of diet that you're feeding. If you're not feeding
reds
diet,
right.
then you could potentially be missing out on some of the iron.
Right.
As well as zinc. Zinc's another tricky one. So
right. Zinc. So we often ask people to consider canned clams packed in water for zinc.
Yep, clams or oysters, I know, are another big one.
Yeah, and so I guess which leads us to what kind of stories do you get from your customers when they've started with your product? Like, what kind of testimonials do you get? You've been around for 6 years. You've heard from people.
Oh yeah, that's really, I think, what keeps us enjoying the industry and enjoying what we do is you hear from people, whether it's through social media or emails, or even for myself, I'm still out speaking with some of the different retailers that we have, doing in-store demos, doing trade shows throughout Canada. So when you get to talk to people and they can tell you their story, whether it be their pet was really obese and they needed help getting their pet's weight down, or they had some type of inflammation issues. I mean, the list goes on, and I feel like we've really heard. I don't want to say all of them for sure, but we've heard quite a few, and it really makes you feel great about what you're doing, and wanting to do better and continue forging through to create something that more people have access to, and get more testimonials from people about how other pets are doing.
Yeah, I find our best advertising is done by our customers at the dog park.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, their friends or family see it, or their friends at the dog park see it, and then you also have two dogs standing next to each other, and someone says, "Well, hey, your dog's coat's so much nicer than mine."
And he's 2 years older.
Right? Yeah, what's going on, or why is yours so much more athletic? And so that conversation goes quick. I always say you can tell from a mile away a properly raw fed dog, and a dog that's not eating fresh food. So
yeah, and so a lot of what we see in the raw food community, some of the myths I hear are like 80-10-10. And so this is I call it a myth or a meme. It's this idea that's gotten within the community that's kind of run, and a lot of people are focused on it. And it doesn't actually, when you think we step back and think about it, it doesn't truly make sense, because 80-10-10 means 80% muscle, 10% organs, 10% bone. But there's no animal that's 80% muscle, 10% organs, and 10% bone. And for the most part, what we're talking about is trying to reproduce, let's say, a historical diet for a dog, but then we're basing that on something that doesn't exist in nature.
Right, and we're not basing that necessarily on any nutritional requirements, or basically what we're saying is that through that's going to meet all the nutritional requirements. And I know from working with some food formulators, and typing, putting in and inputting diets that would be of that 80-10-10 ratio. There's a lot of gaps there, and it might be a great starting place for people who maybe want to do raw themselves and kind of start in that area. But I think there's definitely a lot to be desired, and looked at in terms of just an 80-10-10 diet. So
it is a good guide for a homemade diet.
Yeah, if people definitely, if they're starting there, I think that's a great place to start. But we hope to see people that want to learn more and do better, and look at some of those different nutritional properties that they might be lacking with that 80-10-10 ratio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And so I guess what's next for Iron Will? Where are you guys headed? What's the next big recipe or product?
Ooh, now you're asking for all the secrets.
Come on, what's the secrets, man?
Well, we just this year switched over to our new packaging, which
looks great.
Fantastic feedback from. So we're really enjoying that. We'd like to potentially bring out something that caters a little bit more to smaller dogs. So we're looking at some different packaging for that. And then, like I'd mentioned earlier, some recipe refreshing and just updating. So there's a few things on the
have you considered anything for big dog or multi-dog households?
Yeah, we are looking at something for that as well. Of course, we want to ensure that everybody can feed a species appropriate or a fresh food diet at a reasonable cost. But at the same time, it's tricky, getting to a certain price point, and not skimping on ingredients. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Without compromising your values.
Exactly. So, we're always playing with that, but I think that's something that we're really hoping to be able to offer up.
That's awesome. Well, I don't know that, I think we're pretty much done, Matt. What do you think?
That was a good conversation.
It was about half an hour, and I think I'm happy with it. Do you have anything you'd like to leave with anybody? Any last words?
Any last words? No, I think that as the industry grows, I think it's fantastic for everybody and their pets, and I hope that everybody keeps an open mind to some fresh new ideas and different things that we can come out with in the market to keep our pets healthy.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, Matt, and I thank you very much for your time and allowing us to record this interview for our audience.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
It was a real pleasure.
All right.
So you just hold on a sec there, Matt. Do what?